Bonjour, welcome to Wahsa Distance Education Center's radio Zoom classes. This is SVN3E, grade 11 workplace science, and I am Bronwyn Slate. If you'd like to participate live today, you can call the Wahsa studio at 1-800-465-7144 or 737-4017. You can listen on the radio at 91.9 FM or on the television at Bell Express View Channel 972. You're always welcome to join me live through the Zoom link, which is available from your teacher and also from your DEC. Our classes are scheduled on Monday through Thursday from 3 till 4 in the afternoon, and we are in our 4th week of our 9-week course. At this point, you should be starting to think about submitting some work to be graded. So a reminder that the key questions are the ones to submit for grading, and they are listed at the end of each of your IL lesson in your booklet. So please do all of them. Some of them are check your understanding questions from inside of the chapter. Some of them are activities at the end, and others are the review questions at the end. So show all of your work, all of your steps, your thinking, explaining everything that you understand, and make sure you're actually answering the question and not just talking about the topic, but make sure that you're comparing if that's what it's asking you to do, or talking about strengths and weaknesses or whatever the question is asking. Make sure that you're actually answering the question. You can do this by hand or electronically. If you want to write in the workbook, that is fine. They don't give you very much space, but if you have enough space, then you can write in it. That's fine. It's yours to keep. If you'd like to write it out by hand separately, that is fine too. If you're going to do it electronically and type it up, using Word or Google Docs is the easiest way for me to access your files. You all have access to Google Docs through your NNEC email address. But if you're going to use a different file, a different file type, that's probably fine too. Just touch base with me so that I know, and we can check to make sure that I can actually access your work. All right, so there are 3 different ways to hand your work in. The first is to scan your work if you've written it by hand and send it electronically. So if you have a smartphone, you can scan using the iPhone Notes app or the Android Google Drive app. Then you can send it to studentwork at nnec.on.ca and CC it to bronwyn.slate@nnec.on.ca. Or you can send it through Facebook Messenger to bslate Wahsa. The second method is to drop your work off in Sioux Lookout. We have an outdoor mailbox at our location 74 Front Street. We're the bright red building next to the post office, and we have a small white mailbox next to our side door. We continue to be closed due to COVID to the public, but you can just put it in there and I'll get it within a day or two and then get it back to you as soon as I can. The third method is to hand in your work to your DEC. Your DEC can send your work through the Express or fax it to 807-737-1732 or toll-free fax to 1-800-463-7852. If you'd like to connect with me through social media, both my Facebook and my YouTube channel are under the name bslate Wahsa. So you can friend me on Facebook and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and then you'll get notifications every time I upload one of our lessons. So after airing, I upload each of our lessons, and they're on a playlist called SVN3E on my YouTube channel. And then I share them through Facebook, so you can find them there as well. Science is a really visual subject, so I strongly encourage you to connect to the videos, either joining me live through Zoom or watching the replays on YouTube. I link all of the videos that I show in our class in YouTube. So if you're just listening on the radio and then want to go back and watch just the videos that I've shared, they're all linked under a playlist called SVN3E supplementary videos. And they're also within each of the lessons that I share. There's show notes, and I list them there as well too. So you should be able to find the videos so you can get them from the original source and see get the complete experience. If you don't have access to reliable internet and you can't access them on YouTube, let me know and I can send you a copy of the recording so you can still see the full videos and get the full experience. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact me. My email address is bronwyn.slate, which is spelled BRONWYN.SLATE@nnec.on.ca. My Facebook is B Slate Wahsa. You can call me at the office at 807-737-1488, extension 2209. I do have access to my voicemail now, so you can leave me a message and I'll return your call. You can also call us toll free at 1-800-667-3703. My office hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I like to start our course with some positionality so that I recognize the privilege that I have and how that impacts my understanding of science and education. So I have white settler ancestry, I have white privilege, and that shapes how I walk in the world and how other folks treat me and how I understand things in the world. So that's really important to recognize. And though I work hard to acknowledge and recognize my privilege and how that shapes my understanding of the world, I will not get it right all the time. So I encourage folks to offer suggestions if you think that I need them. I live in Northwestern Ontario on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe people and am trying to honor and learn from that culture in order to integrate those the Indigenous experiences into this course. But it's something that I can only do as an outsider. This is my first time teaching this course, so I do have lots to learn and unlearn. So that's just something to acknowledge. I will definitely make mistakes. I will try to integrate new concepts as much as I can. But if I'm missing something, please feel free to share that with me so that I can do better. Also, our textbook is very Eurocentric. I recognize that it may have some problematic language, and it also does definitely ignore Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis knowledges and experiences. Many of the examples in the textbook talk about white communities and ignore Indigenous communities that face the same struggles or even more intense versions of some struggles. And they also don't honor the knowledges that Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis people have that they've had for generations, but instead refer to Eurocentric and colonial scientists and center that way of knowing and that knowledge as the ideal way of interacting with science. So that's problematic, and therefore I try to integrate Indigenous knowledges as much as I can in our coursework. It is something that I don't know and understand personally, so it is a process. And if anyone has any suggestions on how I can improve or have resources that would be useful for me, I would love to hear about them. So please reach out. All right, so we're in Unit 3, and this is the environmental effects on humans. So we have been talking about the factors of the environment that cause diseases in humans. We've been talking about how the body works, and so how those are impacted, how the various things that we've been talking about in terms of pollution are able to potentially come in contact and are absorbed, inhaled, or ingested in our bodies, and therefore causing diseases. In the future, we're going to learn more about vaccines and other ways to protect ourselves from these environmental factors. But today we're going to look a little bit deeper in how the human body reacts to environmental factors. So we've talked about the environmental factors, we've talked about how the human body works, and now we're going to see how the human body reacts to when these contaminants and toxins come in contact with us. So our learning goals are that at the end of this lesson, you will understand the contaminants, reactions, and diseases that impact various human bodily systems. So you know you've met the learning goals because you can identify types of contaminants that affect various human body systems. You can identify the reactions to contaminants on human bodily systems, and you can identify the resulting diseases. So besides contaminants, which we've talked about, environmental factors include heat, UV, and ionizing radiation, as well as noise. You run the risk of their ill effects by being exposed to excess levels. So this lesson in particular will explain how the human body may react to these factors and to contaminants. We're going to cover some of the common examples. There's definitely other things that do happen, but we're going to just hit some of the very common examples as we don't have time to go through everything. So first, we're going to look at the respiratory system. So remember, your respiratory system is how you breathe. And if you're unsure as we go through these different systems about what they are, go back to the previous lesson and to lesson 9 and look into that a little bit more. So your respiratory system can react to a variety of airborne contaminants, so things that are in the air. So we have in this chart that's in your book, some different contaminants or factors that many of us come in contact. So smoke and smoking, particulates, smog, CO, so carbon monoxide, SO2, sulfuric dioxide, and VOCs, which I can't remember what VOC stands for. I really should, but I will try to remember that over the course of our lesson. So breathing in those contaminants, which many folks, we have smoke and smog in our air a lot. So that is something that is very common. So we all come in contact with this pretty much. So then reactions or symptoms that happen is that we have eyes, nose, and throat irritation or headaches. And then we have inflammation is a disease. So that affects our bodies, that our body just becomes inflamed, and then that makes it harder to process and harder to do the various things that it needs to do. So then also smoke and smoking, particulate, smog, sulfur dioxide, and VOCs, and as well as pathogens, make it so that this has difficult breathing, wheezing, coughing, shortness of breath, excessive mucus, anxiety, weakness. So are all ways that we react to these sorts of as well. And the diseases that this results in are asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, chronic bronchitis, and emphysema. Emphysema. Can't say it. It's just not happening today. So then again, continuing, smoke and smoking also, particulates have hydrocarbons and pathogens, which inflame our lungs and result in a dry cough, which is pneumonia and onitis. And then as well as smoke and smoking and ionizing radiation, hydrocarbons, workplace chemicals, arsenic, and asbestos, which all could be in our environments, have chronic cough, difficulty breathing, bloody mucus, and chest pain. And so this results in lung cancer, or those are the symptoms of lung cancer because of these different contaminants. So that's all can be stuff that we come into contact fairly consistently and have pretty intense effects and react on our bodies. So exposure to ionizing radiation can also harm your respiratory system. So ionizing radiation causes atoms to expel electrons and become ions. You think back to our first lesson, we talked about atoms and ions and how, and electrons and how that happens. So this form of radiation is shown as X-rays or gamma rays, which we've also talked about before. This is our symbol for the warning symbol for ionizing radiation. It doesn't have to be a circle, it doesn't have to be yellow, but this sort of, to me, it looks like a propeller type symbol that is probably going to be in a circle or a triangle, maybe a square or another shape. It might be red. But the primary point is in the center where we have a circle and then 3 wedges that come out of it, and that recognizes or indicates ionizing radiation. So people who fly frequently or work in nuclear energy or work with X-ray or laser equipment are at the most risk of ionizing radiation. So they take lots of steps to protect themselves. But people also who live in areas where radon gas can build up are also at risk. So here is a map of Ontario, and you can see that highly populated areas in southern Ontario, particularly, have a high hazard of radon potential. So most of southern Ontario, and then in some areas around Sault Ste. Marie and Elliott Lake is another high zone, and another high zone just off of Hudson Bay in the Moosonee and Moose Jaw factory and further inland area. And then in Kenora is another area of high hazard, And then far north, close to Fort Severn, is another area of high hazard. So that's just something that is in our communities, in our areas, and something to be conscious of. All right, so let's talk about the digestive system and what impacts we can have there. So the digestive system chiefly reacts to contaminants in your food and liquids, which makes sense, that you ingest, though heat and stress can also affect your digestive system. So again, diseases like cholera, Giardia, and diasteria. Sorry, again, if you want to know how to pronounce these properly, look them up. So those diseases are a result of pathogens. So remember, those are like bacteria and viruses are pathogens, and they result in the reactions in your body. So the symptoms of your illness are intestinal pain, vomiting, cramps, watery diarrhea, bloody stools. And another disease that is common is cirrhosis, which is alcohol and drug abuse. Workplace chemicals are common contaminants or factors into your ingested, and that's going to result in you feeling nauseous, fatigue, weight loss, having a coma, having kidney failure. Another disease is listeriosis, and that the contaminant is Listeria monocytogenes, which the reactions are fever, rash, nausea, headache, exhaustion, shock, collapse, circulatory failure. And another disease is septicemia, which is the contaminant is Escherichia coli, more commonly known as E. coli, which fever, chills, pain, shock, and diarrhea are all reactions or symptoms that we have. Heavy metal poisoning, something else that we can ingest. So often in workplace chemicals or in drugs. So then we have vomiting, diarrhea, trouble breathing, headache, intestinal pain are all reactions in our digestive system. Or we can have cancer of the esophagus or cancer of the pancreas, which is due to alcohol abuse, smoking, workplace chemicals. And their major reactions or symptoms are trouble swallowing, if it's in your esophagus, weakness, weight loss, back pain, clay-colored stools, if it's in your pancreas. So again, these diseases are due to these various contaminants, and then all of our reactions make sense in terms of how our body is ingesting them, and therefore it's digestive issues. So intense abdominal pain, vomiting, diarrhea, as well as headaches or shock or pain further. So many digestive systems diseases are caused by pathogens. So these pathogens are often present at low levels in nature, but however, in unsanitary or unsafe conditions, they can cause their populations to soar dramatically, and then they have an impact on humans. So one example was the case in 2008, the outbreak of listeriosis across Canada. It was traced to a Toronto meat processing plant where equipment was not fully cleaned. This condition allowed the Listeria pathogen to grow and infect meat products that came in contact with it. So by the time the problem was located and fixed, 22 people had died across the country. So this can be dire. This can be life and death if we're not being careful with how we keep our products clean, be aware of things and pathogens. These diseases can end up killing people. So now you should be able to do the key questions on page 79, questions 1 and 2, that talk about the most common contaminant that can affect your respiratory system and what digestive diseases can result from workplace chemicals. All right, and now let's look at skin reactions. So skin reactions, your skin can react badly to substances that contact it. So again, our diseases are, the first is eczema and contact dermatitis, which is if you come in contact with cleaning fluids, workplace chemicals, glues, disinfectants, oils, heavy metals, pesticides, Remember, this is all coming in contact with your skin, so absorbing through your skin. So you're not ingesting it, you're not breathing it in. For these diseases, you may for other reasons, or like you may have other diseases because you do those things, but this is coming in direct contact with your skin. And so the reaction is that you often get rashes and itchy. That's the symptoms of eczema and contact dermatitis. Another disease is alopecia, which is a result of ionizing radiation, and the symptom of this is hair loss. Another disease is urticaria. Drugs, stress, heat, cold, and dust mites are all contaminants, and you end up with hives and itchy hives. Another disease is skin cancer, which is the factor that creates this are UV rays, ionizing radiation, or workplace chemicals, and the symptoms are sunburn and tumors. Another disease is acne. Workplace chemicals and PCBs and herbicides are all factors and contaminants. And so this is like severe adult acne. And then the final one is leukoderma, which is a result of workplace chemicals. And so it's a loss of pigment in your skin. So many plant oils, think like poison ivy, but also workplace and household solvents irritate your skin, can irritate skin. Some can be absorbed into your bloodstream, and then these contaminants can then affect other parts of your body. So not just that surface level rash, but also have deeper issues. Your skin can also be affected by environmental factors like heat and cold. Long-term exposure to UV rays or ionizing radiation can result in melanoma, a deadly form of skin cancer. Melanoma spreads rapidly, and if not detected, and treated early, so it can be something that you need to be paying attention to. And if you miss it, if you're not aware or you don't deal with it, then it can be quite deadly. So one thing that I noticed in your textbook that isn't talked about is that many Indigenous communities are reacting to one other substance, and that is water. And so we know, we've talked about this before, that water in Indigenous communities in Canada often are full of heavy metals, parasites, and bacteria. And therefore, they don't have clean water that they can use. So not only might this cause digestive issues if you're ingesting it, but also in terms of a skin reaction, these heavy metals, parasites, and bacteria can cause rashes, lesions, and lifelong diseases. So I found a video by Brennan McGuire, who talks about, sorry, that's not what I wanted. Is raising awareness through TikTok. So they are showing TikTok videos of their water and sharing this to raise awareness. And I thought that it was an interesting perspective, a little bit about how they go about this. It's just in a news article, so we can watch video through this, and I'll link this in our show notes so that you can watch again if you'd like to. So hopefully it's going to work for me.
Did you have a drink of water today? Needed water. This video was filmed
So that's just one little snippet that I thought was interesting in terms of what is happening in public spheres, what folks are doing in activism in terms of raising awareness and recognizing these issues and addressing them, which then I thought was really interesting how it's not brought up in your workbook, because this is something that is very important, very relevant to our communities, to our Canadian people who live in Canada, and yet our environmental science workbook doesn't talk about it at all. So I just thought that was interesting and concerning. The other thing is that I didn't want to put any pictures or images of folks with rashes, because many of you probably have this experience and have seen people in real life, and you don't need to be that to show up on your feed in your classwork. But it's just something to be aware that this is something that is super concerning in our communities, and this is not being really dealt with. I mean, it's being dealt with not fast enough, definitely not fast enough, and it's taken a long time to get to the point to which it's being dealt with now. But that is another piece in terms of skin reactions, is that it's not necessarily just workplace chemicals or toxics that come in bottles that say that they're toxic. It could be coming straight out of your tap due to the fact that your community does not have access to clean sanitary water. So that's what we're talking about in terms of skin reactions. And now we're going to talk about the circulatory and lymphatic systems, which we talked a little bit. We talked about the circulatory system before, and now we're going to add in the lymphatic systems a little bit too. So a reminder that your circulatory systems routes your blood through your body. So it brings nutrients to your cells and helps remove wastes. White blood cells called leukocytes attack and kill many pathogens that get in through wounds and bites. Single cell organisms called protozoa and parasites like blood flukes often survive. So our white blood cells are trying to attack and deal with these pathogens, but some things do survive anyway. So one example is you can get malaria from a kind of infected mosquito, which is caused by a protozoan. So mosquitoes breed in still water, leaving water in buckets and eavesdrops unsafe. So it's really important to not have standing water in your neighborhood, in your community, because this is where mosquitoes breed. This is where they grow. And though malaria isn't a concern generally in Canada, it's better to just not have that standing water, so that we don't have that issue with any issue with the pathogens and parasites that mosquitoes might be carrying. Also, ionizing radiation and chemicals can harm your blood. So lymphatic system, we didn't talk about before, but so just a quick review of our quick intro of what that is. Your lymphatic system gathers the lymphs from the spaces between your cells. So lymph is a clear or slightly yellow water liquid, and it naturally leaks from your capillaries. So here is a image of where your lymphatic system is. So it's in your tonsils are part of it, and your lymph nodes in your neck and your throat, and then your thymus gland, and then there's lymph nodes in your all of these dark like big green bulbs. So in your armpits and your elbows, and in your core, in your groin, in your knees are all where your lymph nodes are, where they gather this lymph, this liquid that leaks from your capillaries. So once in the lymphatic system, it passes through lymph nodes that filter out bacteria and wastes. White blood cells, again, called lymphocytes, help to do this. Another part of your lymphatic system is your spleen. So the spleen kills bacteria and removes worn out blood cells. The filtered lymph enters your circulatory system through veins in your neck. This process helps to keep the body's fluids in correct balance. Again, ionizing radiation and workplace chemicals can damage your lymphocytes. So here are some common contaminants and factors that cause diseases in your circulatory or lymphatic systems. So malaria, like we mentioned before. So the Plasmodium genus pathogens are the factor, and the reaction is that you get a fever, chills, confusion, sweating, and extreme thirst. Leukemia, which is a blood cancer, is another disease, which is from ionizing radiation or VOCs, which I remember are volatile organic compounds. Sorry, I forgot that before. And your reactions or your symptoms are fatigue, weight loss, fever, weakness, bone and joint pain, and infections. And then the final disease is lymphoma, which is lymphatic system cancer. And UV and ionizing radiation or PCBs and pesticides are the contaminants or factors that our bodies take this in and create this. And so then the reactions are weight loss, fever, night sweats, enlarged lymph nodes, and anemia. So now you should be able to answer the key questions on page 81. The check your understanding questions 1 and 2. So what is the most common reaction your skin will have if it comes into contact with a contaminant? And describe 2 living things that can enter the circulatory system and infect humans. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the nervous system, which again, we haven't talked about before. So we're going to do a little bit of a review of how the nervous system is, and then what the effects are of contaminants. So your nervous system consists of your brain, your spinal cord, and all of your nerves. So looking on our diagram, we have your brain. Your spinal cord is this red part that goes from your brain down your spine, and then your nerves of all of these blue lines throughout your entire body. So the brain and the spinal cord make up your central nervous system, while the nerves and their pathways make up the peripheral nervous system. Nerve endings send pulses to the central nervous system, indicating pleasure, touch, pain, hunger, thirst, sound, smell, sight, etc. In response, the central nervous system sends commands back to the muscles, glands, and organs. So this is how we move. This is how most of our body functions, is that we get information through our nerves, and then we send that to our brains, and then our brains send messages back through our nerves so that we can then move and eat and all the things. So then contaminants that affect the nervous system can be inhaled, ingested, or absorbed through the skin. So anything can affect your nervous system. And because once they are inside the body, they find their way to the blood, which then gets through into the nervous system. Pathogens can gain direct entry to the blood through bites and wounds. And in the blood, these contaminants are carried throughout the body, where capillaries contact nervous system cells. These contaminants then cross over. They frequently disrupt pulses and commands. This means that you're not getting the information from your nerves, isn't traveling to your brain. And then if your brain is trying to communicate something to your body, those commands get disrupted as well. Some of them can get into the brain, which these reactions can prove to be life-threatening. So here are our diseases and contaminants that affect your nervous system. So mercury poisoning, which we can have come from pesticides, fungicides, workplace chemicals, contaminated fish and seafood, and antiseptics. And so our reactions or symptoms of mercury poisoning are irritability, numbness, speech, vision, hearing, thinking, and coordination problems, vomiting, abdominal pain, kidney failure, and a coma. Also, lead poisoning is another one that affects your nervous system. So this is from water from lead pipes, lead in paint, workplace fumes, lead in gasoline. Again, your symptoms are irritability, burning mouth, nervous system damage, pain, mental disturbances, paralysis, and convulsions. Another disease is meningitis and encephalitis, which comes from West Nile virus. And so then your symptoms are headaches, fever, body aches, nausea, vomiting, drowsiness, confusion, weakness, paralysis, and consciousness. And then the final one is deafness, which comes from excessive noise. So that affects your nervous system. And so then pain and hearing loss are the result. And then we're going to now talk about the urinary and reproductive systems, which we haven't talked about before, but they also can be impacted by contaminants. So first, the urinary system helps your body get rid of liquid wastes. So your kidneys filter your blood to remove them. The kidneys excrete the waste as a watery fluid called urine. The urine drains into tubes called uterus to your urethra to your bladder. Oh, the bladder is an expandable sac. When it is full, you feel the need to urinate. When you do this, your bladder empties through a tube called the urethra. Sorry, I had a hard time with my tongue that one. Both the kidneys and urinary bladder are vulnerable to cancers that may be caused by environmental contaminants. So then obvious ones, if you're having cancer, if your body can't function properly, then that affects how your body processes the kidneys and process your urine, and then how your bladder is able to expel it. So here are we're just going to I'm going to skip over this because we're going to go over this again once we talk about reproductive systems, because those diseases affect both your urinary and reproductive systems. So talking about the reproductive system, so bodies with ovaries create eggs that travel through the fallopian tubes into the uterus. So eggs are created in the ovary. Something that I learned recently is that your ovaries are not actually attached to your fallopian tube. So they eject eggs, and then your fallopian tube, like these little tentacles, grab them and bring them in through the fallopian tubes into your uterus. And so then the uterus is an expandable muscle organ whose inner wall is richly supplied with blood in the endometrium. It's where fertilized eggs implant and develop into babies. And then the narrow passageway called the cervix leads from the uterus to the vagina, and that's how some babies are born. So then also another element of the reproductive system, so bodies with penises and testes produce sperm. Sperm are microscopic swimming cells whose purpose is to fertilize eggs. They travel from the testes through ducts to an area behind the bladder. Here the ducts join with others to form the urethra. Then the prostate gland encircles the urethra and adds a fluid that helps sperm to move. So then the ovaries, testes, prostate gland, and related reproductive structures may be affected by environmental factors. So all of these can be affected and therefore make it harder to reproduce. So here are the diseases that are both in relation to urinary and reproductive system. So kidney and bladder cancer. So smoke and smoking, workplace chemicals, and hydrocarbons are all factors that contribute to kidney and bladder cancer. And the reactions are blood in your urine, pain on one side of your body, fever, tumors. Another disease are for infertility or fertility struggles. So PCBs or workplace chemicals can be results. So this can damage both sperm and eggs. These are hormonal imbalances. So again, PCBs, workplace chemicals, non-stick coatings, and the symptoms are sexual abnormalities, which who knows what that means. But anyway, diseases such as ovarian and breast cancers. So workplace chemicals, ionizing radiation, asbestos, talc are all factors that contribute to ovarian and breast cancer. So then pain, tumors, discomfort, weight loss are all symptoms. And then prostate and testicular cancers, pesticides, heavy metals, and PCBs, again, are contaminants. And so then the symptoms are difficulty urinating, blood in urine, tumors, and breast enlargement. So those are the various ways that contaminants can create diseases in our bodies. So we went through, so let's do a highlights of what we've covered. So we talked about the respiratory, digestive, skin, circulatory, lymphatic, nervous, urinary, and reproductive systems. So these are all the key things that make our bodies function. And then we talked about the various contaminants that affect all of these systems. So there are lots, many of them showed up more than once. I think probably I'm sure all of them showed up more than once. I don't have them all right in front of me, but we can go through and compare those different charts in your workbook and see that they all have impacts in different ways and create different, those disease contaminants have impacts on various of these systems. So then we also listed the reactions and the symptoms. So if you're experiencing or you see anybody experiencing those symptoms, you might recognize that they could be due to a contaminant, that toxin that they're exposed to, and that might be resulting in some sort of disease, which we've covered various, quite a range of diseases, from numerous cancers to just other dysfunctions, other ways that body dysfunctions, confusion, and to acne or things that might not seem, or rashes that might not seem to be a big deal, but could be indicators that something might more extensive be happening behind the scenes or working towards that happening in your body if you're continuing to be exposed to those contaminants. So our success criteria are that you can identify the contaminants that affect various human body systems. Hopefully you're able to. That you can identify the reactions that the contaminants have to your body. And then you can identify the resulting diseases. So you can see the connections between the diseases that we discussed and the contaminants that are in our environments. So now you should be able to do the key questions on page 85, which are the review questions from 1 to 13, which will go through those various contaminants and diseases in a little bit more detail. So always, if you'd like to talk more, please reach out. This can be a little bit of a heavier side of this topic. I mean, this course deals with a lot of heaviness in terms of the environmental impacts that humans have had on the earth and the repercussions of those impacts. And so we are dealing with the outcomes of generations, or the last few generations really, of the decisions that they were making, and how we're figuring out how to survive and how to heal both our environments, but also ourselves. And so it can be a bit heavy to be slogging through this information. So if you want to debrief or chat about anything, even if it's not directly in terms of you're not struggling with the actual content in terms of answering the questions, but you just sort of want to chat about the intensity of these issues, feel free to reach out about that beyond. You can totally, I'm happy to listen and talk about things other than just our actual questions. I'm here to support however I can. My phone number at the office is 807-737-1488, extension 2209. You can also call toll free at 1-800-667-3703. My email address is bronwyn.slate, which is spelled BRONWYN.SLATE@nnec.on.ca. You can connect with me through Facebook at @bslatewahsa, and you can also watch this video again or all of our other lessons on YouTube, where my channel is @bslatewahsa as well. My office hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So feel free to reach out during that time period or leave a message outside of those hours if you need to, and I can get back to you when I am back in the office. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a lovely day. Miigwech.